Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this recording of the dataZED session, Taming Your Data Risks. I'll briefly go through with you now an introduction to the session and then hand over to the recording that took place a few days ago. We started by looking at some of the data risks that had played out in the media recently, starting with Manchester United Football Club, who've been sued by their own staff because they had let some payroll information leak into the public domain. We then looked at one of the very large construction bodies who are responsible for training the next generation apprentices in construction work. They had inadequately failed to monitor who was doing the training, what training and when, and it turned out it was actually a very large amount of money that they had incorrectly claimed, and that is now being asked for back with interest and fees. And finally, we looked at this story from last summer, where many people in the UK could not travel at all by air for several days. Indeed, those issues went worldwide as planes were in the wrong place and couldn't go anywhere. And that was all about a data input error, where it was not being processed properly, and it caused the air traffic control system to fail safe and fall over. So from those stories, we go, what's next? And so we're talking about risk and reward. The C-suite are worried about risks, and they know that some of those risks come from data backgrounds. We as data professionals know how to manage those risks. We can do that for them. And if we do that well, then the C-suite can sleep at night. They'll love us for that, and that's good for our career. So by us understanding better the nature of a data risk and how to mitigate it and how to resolve it, that's going to help our leadership be grateful for what we do, to understand the importance of what we do, and ultimately to help both them and us. We'll then go into the aims of the session. So what I want to take you through was what a data risk actually is, to then show you some examples of where we spot these risks playing out in the organization in the different departments and teams, why some risks are actually okay, so these are risks that you will actually accept. It's not all about eliminating every risk you can. There's a way to deal with them. We'll come to that. I then got into aligning with our colleagues in risk management, InfoSec, compliance, also people like legal, for example, and the idea that we don't want to be trying to copy their work, clash with their work, but want to align and work alongside them in an effective way. And then the final step was introducing the data governance framework. It's a pretty simple framework that I put out, and why I like it is, although there are not many components to it, it gives you a really good and robust framework to look at managing not just data risk, but data governance and quality in general. And from there, you can build however you want. And so with that, I'll then hand you over to the recording that took place last Friday. Bye-bye.
So we'll fire in with what is a data risk. And so although in the past we've gone to Wikipedia, now we go to ChatGPT. And then what we do is we go to ChatGPT, we take the definition, and then we correct it because it's never quite right. So the adapted version, I'll say, is a data risk. It's any potential adverse impact on an organization resulting in insufficient data quality or the loss, misuse, unauthorized access, or mishandling of data. The ChatGPT version missed out quality because it was only thinking about what's in the wider world, which is generally about data loss. And I think the most important bit is actually, well, is that data any good? And that's why I made sure to include it. It then carries on correctly. It can affect all aspects of an organization, operations, finance, and what have you. And it can be internal and externally sourced, whether it's from nefarious actors outside the organization or people inside who may be doing it accidentally. And yeah, there could be internal or unintentional. So that's a really quick run through of what we want to cover today. So we'll spot what these risks are, but I think before that, I've kind of done the quick introduction to sort of tell you what we're about, and without really telling you who I am. My name is Charles Joseph. I lead data for dataZED Limited, a data consultancy. I've stuck a QR code on the top right for my LinkedIn profile. Do feel free to give that a quick scan and connect. Look forward to connecting with you, if not already. I started off my career at Deloitte as a grad, consulting in financial regulation, and then quite quickly shifted across into practice protection, which is what you'd call compliance. From that, I got involved in the systems around it, and from the systems, I got into the data. And after several years, I realized what I would now call my job as a master data manager. Had no idea what master data was or how to manage it then, but that's kind of how I saw it. Moved on in 2011 to a Lloyd's of London insurer called Beazley. They were tackling a new regulation called Solvency II, which was the first time that insurers had to worry about data and actually told you must govern your data in a certain way and have certain controls over it. And my role was to take the project work and make it BAU. Having ticked those boxes, it then became a wider data governance lead role as I attempted to bring those good governance habits in and around the wider business, not just the bits that were hit by the regulation. Then went solo back in 2017, formed dataZED, and that was effectively doing similar work on governance, quality, and MDM. More recently, there's been more leadership work in advisory, coaching people at a neutral role. That can be people promoted up from doing level to more managing level, but also people that come from different industry or role. So maybe like an ops person that now has data responsibility, and also helping people to implement. I call it start, restart, or fix. A lot of firms had a go at doing it. Often it may have faded away. Maybe the regulation is no longer so important. Maybe team members have left. Maybe the things got a bit forgotten about. So I help firms, and I really enjoy that mixture of the hands-on work that some clients want and the more strategic work or coaching work that other people want. So that's a bit about me, and the I'll share it again, but that is my LinkedIn link top right. So now that you know who I am, let's get back into looking at risk. And there are lots of types of risk, and I'm sure the risk management experts on the call will know there's many, many more, but I'm going to limit it to a few that we can get through practically in this session. Operational risk itself, financial risk, reputational risk, regulatory compliance and legal risk, strategic risk, and customer service risk. And yes, there are many others, but I think if you can solve these half dozen or even some of them, you are going to be doing fabulously. Op risk. So let's give an example. We import data overnight in a batch from one to another. Something's gone wrong. Maybe it went into a loop. Maybe there was just a rogue file came in that was far too big. Big volume of data comes in and the systems could crash. We come in at 8 o'clock, no systems. We've got outages. We can't get any work done for the morning. We've got to get people fixing it. So that might be quite expensive, depending on how urgent it is. Increased op costs to sort of deal with the issue. And frankly, we're all going to have to work that bit harder to catch up. What about financial risk? And I should caveat that often working as a sort of in the data governance world, data management world, finance can be quite hard nut to crack because finance people have been checking numbers that are important forever, and they do a lot of reconciliations, a lot of controls, and so often I think, well, we do this ourselves, and they don't always want the happy data people joining in. What I find is often it can be quite manual and quite process driven because it's what they've done forever. So I think there's lessons we can learn, but if they aren't your favorite stakeholder, don't worry about it. That is quite normal. So let's take another scenario. Financial data goes wrong, tax filings are incorrect, and so when you report, let's say, reporting earnings per share to investors, and this happened again with a very large PLC recently. They got their earnings per share calculation wrong. There was a small, but there was an important error, but also that meant that the director's share bonus was done incorrectly, and they had to take back a whole load of shares because they thought the earnings were high, they weren't, and so they've been given out shares that weren't merited. You get your tax wrong, you get fines, you get penalties. Those investors who missed out might want to sue you if the share price is tonked up and down. And that's, without even just the reputational risk going, hang on a sec, you're a firm that works in money, you don't even know what you're doing. A second one I've included, just because finance is such a big area for risk, is fraud. So if everything is governed and managed and well known, then fraud is often easier to catch because you spot the difference. If you've got no idea what money is going in, out, and around at all, then that leaves loads of room for anyone to get up to what they want. And again, the financial loss, that might find out your professional insurance suddenly rockets because you haven't got the controls in place. You may even be told, and sometimes a regulator will do this, and say, thou shalt now have more auditing and control. And guess what? That all comes at a price. Your reputation. So inaccurate data leads to false claims and negative posts on social media. This could be somebody in the organization just speaking out of turn. Maybe they're saying things that they don't really know the answer to, or maybe it is that they're reporting about the ESG and saying that they're doing something and they aren't. So Barclays in the newspaper this very morning going, we're being attacked for owning shares in military companies, and actually we don't. But it doesn't matter that we don't, because if Royal thinks we do, and we're taking her up anyway. Or another scenario is a data breach, right? One of our systems, it was a really old one, it was a rubbish system anyway, but it got hacked. Problem is we can't say it was an old system and no customer data on it, because we don't know if that's true or not, because you have no idea what was on that system. So we're left with that situation, either trying to cover it up, which I think hopefully people have stopped doing by now, but either covering it up and getting a really bad rap later on when you're caught, or we have to kind of confess to everything, even when we didn't need to, because it wasn't so bad after all, but we have to kind of take the worst case scenario. Viral backlash, customers walking away, I'll never fly British Airways again, and that sort of thing. And even the Barclays example, they're getting boycotted, which is a bit harsh when it's something they haven't even done. Regulatory, compliance and legal. So especially in banking and insurance, and I guess in pharma as well, you've got to do your regulatory submissions. They've got to be on time. They've got to be clean. That can require loads of work. People spend days and days and days just clearing out formatting issues and making sure things align so they can be uploaded. And sometimes it means they're overdue. And even when they're overdue, they've still got errors in them. Again, not just the penalties and fines. Sometimes you may be told you can't do business in a particular location or a particular line of work. Again, very embarrassing if a firm is told it can't do government business because it's had some sort of withdrawal of permission to do so. And again, everything will go back to reputational risk as well. Strategic. So we're sitting there, we're all CEOs and other C-suite, sit there in the boardroom, we look at the data, we decide we are going to invest in a new offering that the data's told us the world wants and it's going to make us a fortune. Problem is that it was based, let's say it's based on customer surveys that weren't done with any level of rigor. So what we thought would be absolutely fantastic is actually the wrong answer. We're investing in the wrong place, which is opportunity cost, because we didn't put that money where it should have gone. We lose market share, we've wasted our resources. So again, we're making decisions that are just not good. And the final one, customer service risk. And again, we can all experience this firsthand as customers. We expect that a retailer, online or offline, knows what we bought from them, when we bought it, what we spend, whether you want to buy it again. So, if you just bought a car and then 3 months later, the same dealer emails you saying, hey, do you want to buy a new car? We've got an offer on. You're going to think that dealer doesn't know what they're doing, that they're incompetent. Now, actually, we know as data professionals, it's really hard to get this stuff right. To join up all your systems, data sources, single view of the customer, know who to tell and what is quite tricky. But if it's not done right, it just makes you look pathetic. So yeah, our customer support's inconsistent, they get frustrated and they complain. Imagine we're a hire car service and imagine you're hiring a car yourself and you've had a top of the range car and it didn't get through, and they give you a Fiat 500 and you're going to be furious. Do it the other way around. Let's say you book the Fiat 500 and give you the Mercedes S-Class. You'll be quite chuffed, but I don't think you're going to tell them necessarily. So if you can't get control about your customer data, you'll get the negatives, but you generally won't get the benefits. Whew, right. So we've gone through a whole load of risks that will keep people awake at night. And now we should presumably go and wipe them out. Well, no, we don't. What we do is we react appropriately to those risks. Because, as I said at the top, some risks are okay. So if we're going to work out what we're doing here, we've got to understand what we can do with the risk and how we can react to it. And again, risk management professionals will have a lot more detail in this. I'm giving it a fairly high level, to understand what we want to do with the risk. So first option is the one that we probably do without realizing too often, but it's what you do by default, is we accept a risk. So there is a risk to my business that there could be an earthquake that goes through my factory in the middle of England. And if the earthquake hits and knocks the factory out, we can't do much for a long time. But we're in England. We don't get many earthquakes. The cost of earthquake mitigation is enormous. The chances are infinitesimal. So we go, you know what? That is a risk we'll just accept. We're not even worried about it. We eliminate the risk. So we say, we were going to have an idea and we're going to go and sell electric cars. And now we've found that doing electric cars is really, really hard. And we might lose a fortune because they're really hard to design, build, sell, work out technology. So actually, we're going to stick to making, I don't know, we're going to stick to making widgets, and we'll abandon making electric cars. We'll just eliminate that risk. So that's another way. The one that comes up most often in real life is mitigating it. So it's saying, well, we don't want this bad thing to happen, but if you put some controls in place, or we get some more people checking it, or we don't let us, you know, if we spend more than a certain amount, we put a halt to it. So we mitigate the risk. We make sure that, okay, it might go wrong, but in a way that we can tolerate. We transfer the risk, commonly known as insurance. So this is the idea that I don't want to worry about customer returns. You know, if they return a whole load of boxes to me, I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I'm going to store them, don't open them. So I'll go to a third-party company and say, you know what, anything that comes back that someone doesn't like, you just take that risk of dealing with it away from me and just stick it in your own warehouse and sell it on and give me some profit. So any form of insurance or passing over. And then finally, monitor, which is not accepting, it's slightly different. This is going, we know there's a risk. We're not quite sure yet what to do. We're going to watch it and we'll keep a careful brief. So you imagine ChatGPT comes out back end of 2022. This will probably change the world, we're thinking. We just don't understand how or where or when. No one knows yet, frankly, either. So we'll watch it. And then maybe in a month's time or 3 months' time, we'll see. And as we get further into 23, it may become more obvious whether we should engage in it, create our own tool, license it, or what we should do. And then once we understood it better, we can choose to do one of the other 4 approaches. So we've managed all our risks. And then you might think that, you know, someone should then sit down there late into the night by themselves, going through all the risks and going, yep, accept that one, mitigate that one, transfer that one, mitigate another one. These are the people that tell you that governance and risk is really hard because they're trying to do it by themselves. And guess what? That's not an approach I'm going to recommend. What you want is your happy corporate family. And because I'm very, very biased, you know, the governance person will be at the front making everyone else happy. But who are these people? Who are they that we need to be interacting with? So the one that should be the most obvious and is probably the least obvious because, well, middle office and back office, is the business colleagues. We want to know what the business makes money to pay for people like us. And we need to know what they need, what they require, how we can support them, what's going on. Whatever company you're in, the people who are doing the thing that's written on top of the door, they're the ones that need to be supported. If it's an insurance company, who's actually writing the insurance? If it's a car factory, who's actually making and selling those cars? If it's a sports team, then it's all about making sure that team maximizes performance and win some trophies. So the business colleague you've got to think about. We're then got our mates over in risk management, compliance and legal, or if you're this poor and lucky chap, it's one person with 3 different jobs. And I have seen this in quite big firms. People with far too much responsibility, but they have a part to play. In a jacket and tie, that'll be internal audit. And they can come at it from 2 aspects. Number 1 is something's gone wrong, data oriented, and then they're in to work out what went wrong and how to fix it. Or they might be coming in looking and saying, well, let's look at the data organization and how is it working effectively and interacting with everybody else. So audit can have a few different ways of playing in. And then finally, our friends in InfoSec and IT. For a long, long time, everyone thought data was IT. Some of you may end up still reporting into a CIO, hopefully not, but I know it does still happen. But the technology people will play a part. So what we do is going to link into all of them. And then coming through the window at the back are these things that can catch us all out. M&A, suddenly, you know, our firm has bought another one, or it's divested a big chunk of the business. And what do we do about that? Where has the data gone? Where is it coming? Where is it going? And indeed, any major change program, if we're changing our platform, changing our architecture, or even, again, relocating, setting up a new business line, any of these things will have a big impact on data. And it's very rare that data are the first people to know. So we may be on the back foot. And that can be legitimate if it's an M&A transaction that's been kept very, very hush-hush for market confidentiality. And then really the data people can only find out not long before they need to get to work. So how do we align with those people without trying to do their jobs? Because I do another session called Reduce, Reuse, Recycle. I hate wasting effort and wasting work, and the last thing I want to do is do something that somebody else already done, because frankly they probably did it better than me anyway. And we'll give the example of a data policy, which I think every firm should or would have by now. And if I looked at all your data policies, those policies will vary from 2 pages to 200 with different levels of detail and different levels of content. So let's say, for example, someone says, hey, is it going to cover permission to access data sources? So kind of get into the system, kind of look at this data. That might be InfoSec, might be someone else entirely. I'm just giving you a guess. New joiners, movers, leavers, they need access turning on, turning off, new things. Is that part of the HR process for a new joiner, or indeed a leaver? Is that an IT thing? Is it a data thing? Could be. There's no right or wrong answer. We just need to know where it is. I want to view a report. You know, is that a compliance thing? A lot of people go out and say, well, actually, all data should be publicly available, or sorry, available across the business, because the more open we are, the more we can learn. But equally, I've worked in firms who've got different divisions that indirectly compete. And so it is the case that sometimes, if you sit in that team, we cannot let you see this granular data because we'll be breaching all sorts of ethical obligations. And I ended up building at one client quite a complicated report access routine, whereby depending on where you sat and where the report was owned, in some cases it was dead obvious to let you have it, automate that. In some cases it was dead obvious, there's no way you should see this, not allowed, block it. And then in the middle, there's a few where it's, well, this is a question and someone quite high up or owns it needs to make a decision. And obviously those people are very grateful, because we've taken out 3/4 of the people asking them for access to a report. They can then consider the actual complex cases, which is what they should be doing at their time. What else? Someone's got an idea, they want to do a proof of concept. It's got personal data, because we want to work out what you're going to buy or sell. Do your data protection. Sometimes I'll help you. Sometimes they say, no, we want to be the third party outside, and so you do it yourself. We'll tell you if it's any good. Migrating data to a new platform. IT got a part, the architects have a part. And so you can see, depending on what firm you're in, what departments you've got, what the policy could or should look like. It might contain none of these, because each and every one will just be for this section, go and see policy XYZ owned by ABC. Or it might be it's not been done, and I'm going to have to write that stuff myself, either in a third part, in a separate document, or just included. But again, if I can align, and these are written by other people, and we work together, happy days. A second example, again, with this idea of aligning people with their colleagues, and this happens a lot. It's one of the first things I jump on because I know to look for it now. A risk comes up, and risk team find out about it, goes in the risk log. They'll log as a risk or a near miss or an event. It's data oriented, but they don't tell the data team. They'll treat, because the risk team will treat it like any other risk. They'll go, okay, a thing happened. What's our compensating control? What's the impact? And off they go. And meanwhile, we're in data, we're just sat there, didn't even know this happened. Or the other way around, data quality issue comes up, might get fixed, might not. That's another conversation. But actually, it's not just that someone fact-fingered an error. We're caused a big risk because this data is wrong. And that should go on the firm risk log. So if people are always entering data wrongly because there's a faulty screen and it's doubling all the numbers, then naturally the other way around. But if we just say, data error, fix the data error, and then job done, it will never hit the stakeholders, OpsCo, board, whatever it should be. And so being able just to work with the risk team, if nothing else, to get those two directions going backwards and forwards, I think is critical. But they're all people we've got to work with, and InfoSec people, data people, legal people, HR people, risk and compliance people, they all work in different ways, and they may or may not be well disposed to data people either leveraging their work or doing their work. But the first thing you ought to do is engage with them, actually find out who they are and where they're based, because they may not know you exist. Once we talk to them, then we can start aligning and going, do you do this or do we need to do this? And if they say, yeah, data access, we probably should have a policy for that. We haven't, but I feel that, yeah, it's really in my bailiwick, I should do it. And then they write it and work together. Or they say, yep, it's here, plug into it. And then we support each other. You know, we're not adversaries, we're allies, we're on the same team. We should be doing this. And so we work together to make sure that the handoffs and the passovers work. And finally, we monitor it. So we make sure that, okay, when you, I, and the other chap all sat down together, we made it work, but then someone changed role, the contractor left the business, another team came in. So we need some way of monitoring that this alignment works and continues to work over time. There's no point reapproving your data policy every year if it refers to an IT policy that's since been deleted. So I'm going to break off, and I promised people who signed up early on, but I'm just going to say to anyone that's here right now, anyone that wants to sort of have a 30-minute chat one-to-one, I guess if I want to bring a colleague and make it more than one-to-one, but only one of me. You want to have a half-hour chat, which is not a marketing call, but literally a real conversation about what you're doing, what you're up to, where there might be some gaps. I'm happy to make that available to you. Here is the link, datazed.co.uk/June24. I haven't decided yet. I should leave this bit on the recording and let anyone else grab some places. I guess you wait and see. You guys know, because you know you're here live. But if you go in, there are a load of slots in my diary. I think they're all for next week. If that's a real pain for you, then I can probably do you a favor and make it happen slightly after. But I would like to do them in the next sort of week or two, if at all possible. So yeah, go and grab that link. Get yourself some time. If you're lucky, I'll tell you again at the end, but let's have a one-to-one. Right, back to the session. Actually, while I drink, I'll leave that up there. So there's probably a record for me. I've talked for almost half an hour without actually talking data governance, and that record is now over. So I've got a data governance framework. There are many frameworks. Everyone's got a different one. You will notice some bits that you think I should be including or shouldn't, but I find that this is a really robust framework. It's a good start point. It's worked with a lot of different scenarios. Sometimes they focus on different bits, will be stronger or weaker, stronger or lighter in different areas. But for me, this is my start point. And I start off by saying, well, who can I talk to that data? Who actually knows stuff? And I'll call them a community. And then I want to know where my data comes from, and we call that a lineage. And then I want to know what the data is. So I call that a dictionary, or I call it a glossary. And actually now I can even call it a catalog. And then what do we do when we find an issue? So I call that issue management. When I started in Solvency II, they called it data deficiencies, which I just was a terribly negative phrase, but you know, we'll move on from that. And what's not there is data quality. That's on purpose. I think if you've got data quality as your core framework, then all you're doing is finding errors and fixing them. I always say, no, that means you employed two people to achieve nothing, because one person was paid to input dirty data and the second one was paid to try and fix it and might not even manage that. So I think people that go around saying, I'm going to fix data, clean data, classify data, cleanse data, you might have a one-off job that needs to be done for a migration, but in general, I don't want to focus on fixing data. I think if you do these 4 bits together, the quality of your data comes out accordingly. So, drill in a bit more detail into those 4 concepts. Community, so I call them data leaders. It's not a phrase used often, but it's my one. And then you have owners and stewards. Again, owners and stewards are terms that are used all the time. Hate the terms; they don't really describe it very well. But it's a language that we use in the community. And I'll explain it through joining it together. So, data leader, someone really accountable for data, possibly the C in their title, certainly the head of something in their title. Don't do a lot of work day to day on data, but they're just really important. And they are the people that control budget and have influence. So sometimes, for example, when I've gone in as a contractor and I wanted CIO, CTO, CRO to be gone, I've sent the chief operating officer in to have a chat as senior to senior to get them brought in, with then a handover to me to actually tell them what they need to do. But this is the tone at the top, which is so massively important to get any cultural change going. Down to your owners, and ideally, well, not ideally, in fact, it should be that the leaders will guide you to the owners, because they should know who their right-hand people are. These might be across operating entities. You can have a few, you can have a lot, depends on the structure of your business. And they carry that responsibility for data. So leaders are accountable, these people are responsible. And then the stewards are your subject matter experts, which I think is a much nicer way of describing them, because they don't, it's not their data, it's business data. They didn't even enter it, but they do know what it means and where it is and where the skeletons in the closet are and why it is the way it is. And they are helpful. And if you want lots or huge or loads of them, or you want sub stewards going down because different teams, different levels of granularity, knock your socks off, do whatever you want, more the merrier. Secret sauce then is I take our data owners and think back to the picture of the happy group around my laptop before. Is you take some data owners, ideally the most important ones, because we don't want a room with 50 people in, nothing ever happens in those meetings, but you get a good number of data owners, you get people from, and again, what's relevant to the teams you have, risk, InfoSec, data protection, big change stuff. And then that becomes your data governance group, and they're the people that can actually make decisions. So we found a problem, we found a solution, we got a cost or a resource requirement. I need people that can tell me, can we do it or not? And I'll say, yeah, I've got budget. I had one COO who came to a few meetings, but he's a very busy guy. He said to me, I'm sending my deputy, but she's got authority. If the project is under 10 grand to fix, she can just sign off there and do it. I'll spend up to 10K without even looking at the problem. If it's bigger, I want to be involved, fair enough. But that ability to say, we found a problem, we know what to do, and we're going to fix it, or equally and more and just as important, we found a problem, we've understood the impact, and actually we don't care, it's fine, we're going to accept it. Great, that's what the group should be there for. The working group is slightly different. That to me is a benefit to the organization by bringing stewards together, because they can share war stories, they can share experience, they can share tips. If someone's done some cool data viz and they know how to design it in a nice way, they can share that. Fabulous. So I see the governance group as decision making and the working group as being about effectiveness. Lineage, so where our data come from. You ask an architect or you run a tool, that will be the diagram we get. I never understand them. All those lines just make me dizzy. There are other ways of displaying it, but really it's about understanding, well, I've got this data, where did it come from? They come from a tool, a system, a spreadsheet. And we need to understand, sometimes that will be scannable because we're just following cells in a database, tables, columns, or it could be that there's a lot of manual work involved in it, saying, well, actually this CSV file is passed to that team, they hand type some numbers into a different spreadsheet, they then run a formula, they pivot it, they put it into a chart, the chart is handed to it, and then these are all manual processes that we have to just talk about and explain. xkcd.com, the cartoon website, I think it sums up lineage quite well. We've got a lot on top, and then like a little bit right underneath, which I think is dependency on. Ideally, your lineage will spot those sort of breaks. And I actually like the diagram so much, it's not relevant to the session now, but I did this for a LinkedIn post last year. But it feels to me like all this great stuff, LLMs, GenAI, Fabric, Mesh products, are all built on governance and quality. down at the bottom. And there is a relevance to me sharing this, which is that if you go and get a big budget for a governance project, you're going to find it quite challenging. But if there's a data mesh project and we can say, right, within that, the first work stream should be data governance or quality or both. Here is a Gen AI project. We say, well, hang on, before I get AI involved, the data's got to be good. Our first overarching work stream is governance. I think that's our way into support some really cool stuff that's going on right now. Dictionary, glossary. So what have we got? What do you mean by it? What are the terms? I want discrete definitions that are clearly written and accepted. So I want to understand what we mean by a term, and I don't care if Ford say a car is a device with 4 wheels and Toyota say it's a car with N wheels. There's lots of ways of describing things. As long as in my organization, we know what it is. And if you join my organization, you can see, well, over here, we call this that. That's great. Those terms in the title are used interchangeably. There is a subtle difference. Dictionary is normally for techies. So, you know, this cell contains this content and it's a string with this many characters in this format with this many rules over it. So a very technical definition. And if you see a scanning tool, it's probably going to do that by looking at the tables and telling you what the field is and where it goes and how it looks. And if you've got a data warehouse of 50,000 entries, that's probably what you're going to create at best. Glossary is for the business. This is what I mentioned earlier about what do we actually mean by this term. So maybe I'm looking at insurance premium, and there might be 25 different versions of premium in the warehouse because some are pre-tax, post-tax, including fees, excluding fees, including commissions, excluding commissions. And if you want to build a report or compare, you just want to know, well, that's beautiful. Great, we know so many different types of definition. Which is the one we use when we make our quarterly business review? Is it the pre-tax one or the post-tax one? Is it the pre-commission one or the post-commission one? So we set out with the business helping to actually write it. What are those terms? Excuse me. And then finally, catalogs the inventory of all data assets. Now we're bringing in things like unstructured data, Internet of Things, all the, even large language models, what models you're using. So all the data stuff that can be anywhere and goes into a broader catalog. Last component is issue management. Actually my favorite because I like digging in and fixing stuff. So people will say, right, found a data quality issue and it's come up, so we'll fix it. And then if we get another one, we'll fix that. That's a reactive approach, which I don't think we should do. I think we should be proactive and looking to say, what caused that problem and can we stop it from happening again? Because I want them to not only prevent reoccurrence, but if I fix a problem down at the source, then all the other people impacted who didn't realize they had wrong data are getting the benefit for free. If I fix it upstream, then the person that had the problem now has a solution, but nobody else benefits, and that feels like a wasted opportunity. And then I mentioned it earlier, and this is where the strands of the framework fit together. The data board have to make decisions. What are they going to do with these risks? Accept, eliminate, mitigate, transfer, monitor. Are we going to say we're happy with that? Are we going to check, we check the lineage, we find the problem? Do we delete, get rid of the system? Do we migrate data? Do we spend money fixing it? And as you've probably realized, those 5 terms are exactly these 5 terms. And that's not an accident. That we should be looking at data issues as data risks and saying, this is how we're going to fix it. It's not simply the number's wrong, put in the correct number. It's numbers are going wrong. That's a problem. What are we going to do about it and how are we going to treat it? And so that's why I think we then say for this issue, are we going to accept, eliminate, mitigate, transfer, or simply monitor it? And that's it. That is slightly under 10 minutes, looking at a very basic but very robust data governance framework with people, with data sources, with data descriptions, and fixing the data. And you can roll that out as an MVP if it's not done somewhere else or a new company or never done it before, really quite quickly. Even if you do it over a couple of reports and say, look, for these couple of reports, who's responsible for it, accountable for it, who knows about the SME content, where did it come from, how did it get there, what do the different terms mean, and how do we fix the problems? You do that for 1 or 2 key reports, and you're starting to build a framework out for the whole organization. And if you did it for a report that people care about, then they'll see the benefit and say, hey, can you do that for this report and that data source and that process? And what more can you ask for than that? If you want a bit more content than what I've gone through here, I have done a booklet you can grab off my website. There's a couple of other booklets there now. dataZED.co.uk/downloads. You stick in your name and address if you haven't done already. And yeah, there's a 12-page PDF currently. And indeed, I'm starting to write more of these booklets. If there's a content or topic that you think would be really, really helpful, then give me a buzz and maybe I'll write one for you. Back to the beginning. Make sure that I did what I said I'd do. So he said, how do you understand what a data risk is? And I fire that straight off at you by showing you some big newspaper headlines about people getting very awkward, embarrassed and troubled by things that have gone wrong with their data. Then talked about where you can spot them, whether it's through reputational risk, through legal risk, whether it's through financial risk. Talked about why we should accept some. That's a risk that's okay, and lots of other ways as well. Talked about the alignment with our friends over at Risk, InfoSec, Compliance, HR, and many besides. And then I even took you through my framework. So I think I have covered all that I promised. So final points. I'm going to put this challenge onto you guys. What are you going to do that will enhance your organization based on what you've learned in the last 41.5 minutes? But what are the barriers to success? Is it budget? Is it people? Is it time? And what are you going to do, not just in general, what are you going to do when you get back to work? So you get back to your desk after lunch or wherever you are in the world, whatever you're doing. Are you going to do anything right away? Or are you just going to sort of file this as a thing you did earlier for some CBD points? And when? So you might have made a plan, or you might be about to make a plan of action. I've got another session all about that if you want to join it. But is it going to be a thing you do on Monday? It's going to be a thing you do before year end. Are you going to try and get into your objectives for your next annual review, so you do it as part of that? And finally, what does success look like? And this is one of the many things I steal off Amazon. Amazon had this concept where you have a new feature or a new service. They get you to write the press release that describes how brilliant it is. And so you say, we delivered, I don't know, Alexa. It's a new gadget that lets you do things by voice, and it had all these benefits. And then once you can see that, and they go, yeah, that would be an awesome thing to have in the world. They then go and try and build an Alexa, and they work backwards to get to the start. So what does your success look like? Is it more robust data? Is it higher quality? Is it putting your framework in place? Is it getting friendly with your risk manager? So as I'm writing the booklets and what I said now, all the stuff that I've talked about, you can do yourself. It's not rocket engineering. And it just requires a bit of thought and a bit of time and a bit of people skills. But I'm aware that that doesn't work for everybody. Maybe you just don't want to get into the detail. Maybe you've got too much in a day job, and so you're trying to get other things done and you want some side support. So that's why I kind of plug my services. I work with all sorts of teams, the data team, ops, risk, and we've been helping internal auditors do their auditing. You might want some maturity assessment, so you can baseline where you are, and then you can tell the C-suite, all our peers are around there and we're down here. Equally, you might say, you know what, of the different areas of data management, we're quite good at most of them, just a little bit to fix. And so less work than you thought. So yeah, it might be that you've got really good elements of data management, organization, and there's a little bit you can't do, so I can help you with the gaps. Again, I'm not trying to do a whole all-in-one solution here. We'll just do the little bits that are needed. More recently, we're doing training and coaching. So again, you're new to the role, new to the area, you just want a bit of support. So one client, I came in as an interim because a new person was still working out their notice. So I came in as an interim, got governance started. Then we worked side by side to roll it out, and I helped him with that process. And then it dropped down to a mentoring relationship. So I came in once a month and then latterly once a quarter, just to make sure they're on the right track. And now he is cycling by himself and I aren't there anymore. Final bit, if you do want tech, some people do, and if you scale up, tech is very important. I can help the RFPs and procurement. Again, stuff that you might well be able to do yourself, but it's just another thing on top of the day job. So to be able to outsource that if I'm doing the long listing, short listing, talking to a load of account managers, and I can come to you in a brief meeting and say, hey, here's the short list, what do you think? Or here are the recommendations, you can choose a final two. It just takes that weight off you, which I'm more than happy to do and really enjoy doing. So 12:45, I said 45 minutes in the calendar invite. I said an hour on the LinkedIn post, which because my data integrity is lousy, never mind. So if you need to pull off now, then that's cool. Otherwise, I've got time for Q&A, and happily a few people did do some Q&A in advance, so I will go through those first, and then if we have time, we can always do a few more live ones. So Michael, who I don't think is on the call, but he'll get the recording afterwards, I suppose. So Michael gave me two questions. It's nice of him. He said, what standard controls should we define for data risks, and how much help do we provide? And then talk about lines of defense. So I think this comes from a particular way of looking at data, which is a control-led mechanism. So, you know, we are worried about certain things going wrong, so we'll mitigate that risk by putting a control in place. And I guess if you've got identified data risks, then working to put a control in place makes a hell of a lot of sense. And especially if you work with your risk management colleagues who do this day in, day out, they'll really help you to make them effective controls. So I wouldn't say standard controls. I would say it's about being effective controls. And you've got your data head with the risk team's risk control head. You work together, and I think you can then actually work out a really good set of doing that. We don't want to overboard controls. I've seen organizations that did a quarterly control on annual process. So 3 times out of 4 a year, they just tick the same box because it didn't have any update whatsoever. And then the other two bits I put together about the central data team. So risk is often run what they call a 3 lines of defense mechanism, 3 LOD. First line is people doing their day job, i.e. you're doing your job, you should spot when things are going wrong. Second line is your risk team, compliance team, who are there to make sure that everyone's behaving. And third line is your internal audit or your external audit, who are the backstop. And a bit of a cheat, I'd say data management is almost like a one and a half line of defense. We're not front office, we can't claim to be, but we're definitely not risk. And I don't want to be treated like a policeman. And that goes back to the how helpful should we be? And I think we should be super helpful because we want to make the organization function better. And if us explaining or devising a control helps the team avoid data error or data problems, then we should be all over that. We're not the police, we are there to help the business. So that covers that one. Thomas, thank you. He asked about what are the essential policies and standards for governance of projects. So for me, I was thinking, well, I don't think we should be governing the project separately from the wider organization. The data is the data. And so our policies, controls, standards, manuals should all be flexible to cover that. But I guess what you might also be thinking about is actually the project governance side. And that's why I referred to in the change management piece, making sure that they're involved in the data board and committee and so on. So that when a project comes along that's doing massive things with data, we have eyes over it. And I think that might be more effective than giving them a policy to follow, because program managers are massively busy people and may not get the detail. I think having that data activity involved and connecting into those projects is really good, and actually good for your profile as a data professional, that you get more involved in getting things done. So again, we don't want to be policemen. If we're helping to deliver the project, then let's do that. And the final question I got in was from Bill, asking about strategic partners. So thanks, Bill. For me, that again, I read this in 2 different ways. One is about sort of consultants, contractors, solution integrators, service providers. And I think, again, they can help just because they have that slightly outside view, that sometimes people like us can spot things that the firm can't do, or we can say things that people with a view to their career can't say. And so that ability to sort of say things and be listened to is massively helpful. And then the other type is on the technical side. So if I was doing this talk 10 years ago, it would have been start small, do stuff in Word, do stuff in Excel. If you ever reach a point of being really big and busy, then maybe we'll buy a tool or get some tech, but only if you need it. I've now done pretty much a 180 on that. I think the tools are now so effective and accelerate your path so quickly that I think you need to get them in sooner rather than later. And if you've got a project, then get them into the project because it's the easiest way to get them brought in. And also, these service providers have an interest in helping you. They don't want to be brought in and then it fails, because then they just get their one project delivered, they get one check, and they'll never use you again. It's in their interest, whether it's a consultant wants to be brought back, whether it's a tool tech firm want to be renewed. So they want to help because they want to do more and more with you. So use it. I mean, if they've seen your problem at 10 other clients, then you might as well find out how they solved it and frankly steal the good stuff. So, well, actually, so that was a Q&A in advance. Just briefly, if there's a hand up or someone wants to go off mute, are there any questions or comments people want to add now?
I'll go. Firstly, that was really great, so thank you. It's going to be a focus of mine for the next 6 months, so this is a handy kind of primer for some of the groundwork that I've already done. I guess my question would be, what are the most common mistakes where you're going in, and if people have already started and then start to struggle with data governance, what are the watch outs and what are the common mistakes that people tend to make with tying themselves in knots with this stuff?
Great question, thank you, Thomas. Common mistakes. So I mentioned the policeman one already. If people think you're in compliance, then it's going to hate you. So why do you ever do that? What else? Viewing data governance as a project. So no, you've had your 6 months, you've had your funding, data is now solved, so go away. And I learned that massively because I did the Solvency II data rollout, and then I thought I'd proved it, and I thought, well, I'll delete all the gold plating and the good stuff I'll do everywhere else. I thought I had an easy way in, and then when I hit all the brick walls, I realized that people listened to me earlier because they knew if they didn't comply, the regulator would be all over them. But now the regulator wasn't a threat, they didn't have to listen to me at all. So it started me on what's become my whole journey about actually selling the benefits and explaining why it helps. And if there's bits that don't help, then we don't do them, because why should we? So I think always be selling is actually going to be, what I say, is a big thing to get into. I think too many people are sort of on the preachy side. We want data to be right because why do you ever want it wrong? And thou shalt have data right. And other people have got far better things to do at their time, so they tend to ignore that and don't want to engage. So I'd say that's a big mistake to avoid.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else? Or let's shoot on. Yeah, so follow-ups. So there we go, QR codes are back up. Top one is my LinkedIn. I do a newsletter. I used to be weekly. I then got a bit less frequent. It's minutes monthly now, but it's still quite nice. And if you log on, you actually see all the stuff I've written on the website, and you can search it and search by topics. There's lots of little nuggets out there. Interested to hear from you guys. And again, if you're watching recording, I'm always interested in still email me after the event. What will be useful to you? What topics are coming up? Every panel, webinar, show, conference sessions about AI governance. But I'm also hearing that no one really cares about that because it's too far off and they just want to get the simple stuff done. So I'll hand it to you. What do you want to hear about? If you found today great, tell your friends, whether that's to watch the recording or whether I rerun a similar session or different session in the future. And also, does it help for me if you share anything that you like, whether it's an insight, an idea, a thought it raised, and you give me a tag on your favorite social media, that would be much appreciated. But I will leave you there with my contact details, and have a wonderful rest of the day and weekend.